Hey, so the other day I saw a post on Twitter, this one, and it's by Tom Null Pointer, and he's reminiscing about making pixel art on old 8-bit computers. And that's something I used to do as a kid quite a lot. And it's also the way I accidentally learned binary. And I tweeted to say that, and a friend of mine was like, "Can you please explain what you're talking about?" So I thought I would just quickly do a video on how I used to define pixel graphics on my old 8-bit computer when I was a kid, and how it taught me binary. So I used to have, or rather my parents had, BBC Micro, which was an 8-bit computer. It was very popular in school, so if your parents were teachers like mine, then you would end up with one of these computers. And if your parents weren't teachers, you would end up with a Spectrum or a Commodore 64 or something like that. And they tend to have a few more games. But however, all of them, you program them in BASIC, and all of them had this idea of having what we used to call a UDG, or a user-defined graphic. And you can see on all of these, if I go into mode 1, each of these little characters is made of an 8x8 grid of pixels. And the UDG was one that you could define yourself and then use in your own programs. So you could define a little person or something like that. So I'm just going to write a little program here. And I'll show you what the problem was. So I think I'll use mode 6. I'm going to start off, I'm going to have a little dude that runs across the screen. And I'm just going to use a D to move him, or maybe an A, I don't know. Okay, so that's a little program written in BASIC. And what that does is it sets my little dude to be represented by the A character, and then I move him from left to right across the screen. So let's run this and see what it does. Oh, that was much too fast. Okay, let's make that a bit slower. So the way we used to make things slower is we would just put a little loop that does nothing in the middle, and that would slow things down. So I'll do, let's say 30. Let's see how that goes. Okay, there you go. There's a little dude runs from one side of the screen to the other. In fact, I will make him go slightly less far because he's coming up out on the bottom again. And also I'll make him slightly slower. Okay. Now, if I list my program, that's what it is. And I have my little dude, but it doesn't look very much like a little dude. So this is where the user-defined graphics come in. So let me just switch over to my pad. Okay. So we'd have to make a little an 8x8 grid. So this is the way I used to do that. I'd kind of divide it in two on each side. Helped make all of the lines relatively equal. Actually, I'll just draw across these ones to make it show up in the video a bit better. Now, what I'm going to do is fill in the bits that I want to display. So I'm going to draw a little fella, an 8x8 grid. Here's his little nose. Let's give him a body. He's got a little leg going in front of him. This person is facing right, by the way. And he's got a little leg going behind him, and his little foot. and an arm going behind him, and an arm going in front of him. There we go. A little dude, and he's kind of going. Well, I've only got one frame of animation, but that'll do for now. And then the way I learned it when I found out how to do this is there's a whole set of numbers that you would have to write along the top, and I'll write them here. And I didn't at the time really understand the significance of these numbers. I just knew that you had to get the numbers right. It's an 8, not 6. You had to get the numbers right, otherwise your graphics will come out all wrong. So what you then have to do is for each thing that you filled in, you'd have to add those two numbers together and write them over here. So 16 plus 8 is 24. 16 plus 4 is 20. Here we've just got a bit of neck, which is a single one, so that's 8. Here we have 32 plus 16, that's 38. 48 plus 8 is 56, plus 1 is 57. Here we have 64, plus 8 is 72, 76, 78. Another one which is just 8 here. Then we have 32 plus 16 is 42, 48, 52, 53. And here we have 32 and 2 is 34. So now I've got all of these numbers and I'd have to type them into my program. So I'm just going to show my program a little larger this time. So if you remember, we have, get the cursor. We have our little character going across. Now, let's list my program. So what I need to do now is define my user-defined character. And on the BBC Micro, this was done differently on the Spectrum. But on the BBC Micro, you did it using the special VDU codes. So VDU 23, then you had, I think it was positions 224 to 255 you could define yourself. So 224, we're going to define this one as, and now I'm just going to write down my numbers that I took down previously. So that's 24, 20, 8, 57, 78, 8, so 53, yes, 53, and 34. And then on this line, I'm going to change it. Let two strings to equal character string, character string 224. I'm going to renumber that. There's our program. So now, if I run it, yeah, you can see I've got my little dude. That's right. Actually, let's make that a bit slower. So let's make him twice as slow to make him a little easier to see. So I'll make the little pause loop slower. Boop, 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 boop. And we have our little fella. And so that's how you define all of your graphics. Obviously, there were other ways. This only gives you graphics that are made in 2 colors. You can change the color. It doesn't have to be black and white, but that's kind of the default. But yeah, you would end up with all these little notepads full of these user-defined graphics. The other thing was, of course, that normally in your family you'd only have one computer. So I had 2 brothers and a sister and my mum and dad, all of whom used the computer at some times or another. So often you would have these kind of pads full of these little graphics because that was something you could do to work on your game or your program when you didn't actually have access to the computer. So yeah, how does this all mix in with binary? So I hadn't really noticed it at the time, but each of these numbers is double the one on the right of it. So it doubles each time: 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. And if I start writing each of these out, where I have a 0 where it's white and a 1 where it's black, let's try that. So that top one is 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, which is 24, and that's binary for 24. And the same for the next one down. But of course, normally when you write a number, you don't bother putting lots of zeros in front of it. If I, write down, let me see, the number of houses I've lived in over my life, I don't do 0, 0, 0, 24 or whatever it is. So you can leave out the zeros at the start. So let's do the next one. The next one is 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, which is 20. 8 is just 1, 0, 0, 0, etc. So I basically learned how to set all of these things up, and it wasn't until later I found out that that was actually what binary was. When we covered binary in school, I thought, oh, well, this is easy. This is just UDGs all over again. So that is how I learned binary at, I guess, the age of about 10 years old, from wanting to write my own games on my little 8-bit computer. Well, thank you for listening to me. See you around.